This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our sources and trying to figure out exactly what happened, but clearly something relatively devastating happening this morning there on the south end of the island of Manhattan. That is, once again, a picture of one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
When you can see these pictures, it's obviously something devastating has happened. And again, unconfirmed report that a plane has crashed into one of the towers there. We are efforting more information on this subject as it becomes available to you.
Great day of celebration. There's an undercurrent of sadness. We lost Michael so suddenly. Such a swift transition after such great anticipation of musical comeback. He was preparing vigorously. We were to be in London this week. We look forward to that as a kind of family vacation. And so while there is celebration, there is an undercurrent of sadness.
Has a partnership with a company called Crimson Hexagon that can essentially analyze what people are saying about any topic online. It's like an instant opinion poll, if you will, except you don't need a poll question because people are already talking about it. Today, they have turned their attention to what people are saying on Twitter about President Obama's decision to nominate Sonia Sotomayor to the Supreme Court. And they have found the following results. 31%, as you can see, approve of the pick. That's the large tranche here. That's people saying that Obama has made a good pick and that Sotomayor will be a good justice.
Whether you've seen it in Vegas, one of their traveling shows, or watched Cirque du Soleil on TV, there is one ticket that you just can't buy, and that's the backstage pass. That's why we're here. We're taking you inside to see what it's like to be a performer in the show.
My name's Anthony Gatto, and I'm a juggler in Cirque du Soleil's Kuza.
When most kids were still trying to balance homework and cartoon time, Anthony Gatto
That was a 5-club pirouette, which I do that in my show.
Was juggling a career. At 8 years old, he went pro.
My stepfather was in show business. He was an acrobat and a juggler, and he married my mother when I was 3 years old, and at that time he started to teach me how to juggle.
Even with all that experience, you might be surprised how long, every day, twice a day on weekends, it takes to get ready. We watched him in the performer's tent where the Kuza cast warms up for the show.
I, train with the juggling for 2 hours, and then I usually run in the morning, a couple miles, and I also lift weights. Right before my number, about 45 minutes before, I start to warm up again, do some shoulder shots. I do that really right up until the moment I walk out on stage.
All that work for a 10-minute act. An act, by the way, that keeps it all in the family. That's his wife, who also travels across the country with the show.
I practice at, 100% of my ability so that I can work at about 30% of it. Because with juggling, you really have to have a lot of confidence. And if you start questioning yourself or second-guessing anything, that's when you have problems. So you want to kind of go on stage and know your number and not think too much. When I go on stage with 7 clubs, I might do it for 5 seconds, but I know in the back of my head that I can do it for 4 minutes.
We wondered how often he drops the ball, so to speak.
And I messed up.
Turns out he does a perfect show about 60 to 70% of the time. And the rest of the time, well, you might not even notice.
Sometimes I'll drop a club and I can actually continue the pattern and kick it up with my foot, and maybe they'll think that's part of my number.
But the true test is making a novice feel like a circus star, at least for a second.
The true master.
I'm Reggie Aki, and that is your backstage look at Cirque du Soleil.
Nasser Abdelhadi starts his morning commute buying vegetables in East Jerusalem for his hotel in Nablus in the West Bank. His story is a mixed bag of sorts. He's a Palestinian with an American passport who grew up in the West Bank, but graduated from the University of Alabama.
We used to go in spring break from Alabama to Florida. The taste of freedom that I've tasted in the States is it's incredible. Now here, you cannot drive your own car.
Nasser returned to the Middle East to invest in what he thought would be lasting peace. He bought a hotel, thinking millions of Christian pilgrims would come to historic Nablus for the millennium. 9 months later, this latest intifada erupted.
Sometimes you will find 5, 6 checkpoints, sometimes 2, sometimes none. We don't know today.
Nasser's 40-minute commute to his hotel can now take 4 hours or 4 days. A Palestinian taxi at the main Israeli army checkpoint between Jerusalem and the West Bank is just the beginning. It's around 9 in the morning. 10:15 a.m., the road ends at another army checkpoint where the soldier motions us to go back.
Stop.
10:30 a.m., another checkpoint. This time, our taxi driver wants to convince the Israeli soldiers to let him pass. The soldier motions him to flip up his shirt and twirl, presumably checking for explosives.
Go back. Where are we going to go back? We're stuck between 2 roadblocks.
Instead, our driver returns to put up his hood, pretending to have engine trouble until the soldiers pass. Nasser looks worried because the hard part is still ahead.
We're going to go through now the dirt roads.
He wasn't kidding, and we weren't alone. At times, the road was so pitted, we had to lighten the taxi's load and walk part of the way.
See, those are my siege shoes, especially.
11:14 a.m. Word has spread on which roads are opened and closed. The olive groves where John the Baptist wandered in biblical times are jammed with traffic.
We haven't seen anything yet. The fun just started.
The strangest part was still to come.
I'm told at this point this is it for the taxis, and we've got another hour to go. Some of it's going to be on foot, and we might have to try something else.
The Palestinians call it animal service, and a bizarre scene began to unfold. I met soda merchandisers and building contractors on the donkey trail. It made me wonder if the pressure Israelis put on Palestinians to stop the suicide bombings could work.
The Israelis would say that the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority can change this. They have Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority can change this so that people don't have to live like this.
It's a vicious circle. Now the Israelis are putting siege on the cities because of security reasons. But again, if you make people poorer, they will be more desperate, they will do more.
You don't have to. You can sell the hotel in Nablus.
I don't know if I can sell it now. I don't think anybody will buy anything in the West Bank. Real estate is down. But even if I maintain it, I think we do it maybe because it's our country, because it's our family is here.
4.5 hours after leaving Jerusalem, Nasser Abdel Hadi arrives in Nablus. His commute, like the peace process he invested in, right now a ride into the unknown.
We're home.
Carol Lynn, CNN, Jerusalem.
If college football is, as they say, a religion in the South, then this is one of its most majestic cathedrals. The campus of Ole Miss, home of the Rebels, and in particular, this tree-filled expanse near the stadium called the Grove.
It's nothing like it. Saturday football in the Grove.
The game is really just an excuse. The real action is in the Grove. Acres and acres of party tents in the shade of old magnolias and oak trees.
I got here this morning about, well, I got my tent here about 3:15.
That's in the morning. It's the way the Ole Miss faithful have been doing football Saturdays for generations.
Very first day in the Grove.
More food than anyone could possibly eat, and maybe a little bourbon too, if it's hidden well. After all, this is a dry campus. It is a snapshot from the 50s. Pretty young co-eds dressing up for a football game. The boys, too. Traditions, like hating Alabama, today's opponent.
We think that Alabama can go to hell.
Yes.
Honestly, because we don't like them. We almost hate them as much as LSU.
And traditions like the Walk of Champions. The team parades through the adoring crowd on its way to the stadium, led by quarterback Eli Manning. Talk about traditions. It was Eli's father, Archie Manning, now worshipped in these parts, who brought glory to Ole Miss some 30 years ago. The speed limit on campus, 18, Archie's old number. But today he's a proud father, along with a proud older brother, Peyton, who who took a day off from his NFL job to come watch. But other traditions around here are more complicated, mixed up with symbols of the Old South.
Symbols are very powerful, and symbols mean a lot of things.
To Don Cole, now assistant provost at Ole Miss, the Confederate flag was a symbol. As a student in 1969, he was expelled for protesting racial policies. Now he's in the Grove partying where once only whites were welcome. Another symbol is Colonel Reb, the Ole Miss mascot who was banished from the sidelines this season by the university.
We thought that it would be a good thing to kind of upgrade and move on with mascots.
But students disagreed, and not just the white students. It is a different campus now than the one James Meredith integrated back in 1962. On this campus, on this Saturday, it's not just the whites who are rebels. For many of the younger people here, it seems the past, with apologies to William Faulkner, really is past. And Colonel Reb was just the lovable old mascot, the only one they'd ever known. Another Manning touchdown pass. Though beating Alabama has not been a tradition around here, they did so convincingly on this day. They did it without Colonel Reb on the sidelines. Instead, Peyton and Archie looked on. Old times, they are not forgotten. Bruce Burkhardt, CNN, Oxford, Mississippi.